I think that just as we're living in a nuclear age, we have grown so tremendously in scientific knowledge. It doesn't seem too much to say that men can begin to awaken to the fact that they haven't grown enough spiritually and haven't recognized their spiritual capacities.
Once something like eating is death, then you've struck at the very heart of life. The enemy of the older radical theories may have been the ruling class, but today the stakes of whether we will reform ourselves into a new kind of human being, a new kind of society, whether we will find selves worth being, the stakes of it are simply life itself.
Well, we're back for another farm update from Spencer and Emily Hess, and they are with the JPII Catholic Worker Farm in Kansas City, Missouri, that the Maurin Academy is associated with through just our relationships with each other, basically. We are founding members of the Maurin Academy, along with a couple of other people, and I've sort of thought of the JPII Farm as the physical campus in a way. We hold our communio reading groups there monthly, and I'm there just about every month. And, so there's a lot of overlap, I guess you might say, in what we do. But you guys are there all the time, and we wanted to check back in and just see how things are going there. Last time I know we talked about a lot of different things that people are interested in, and they can go back. It was in January. So about 6 months ago, we checked in. Now you've been through a whole nother summer, and I know you've picked up the goats and the sheep, as well as you've still got your chickens, and I don't know. So I guess I'll just start out with just, how are you feeling about things now? How are things going? Tell us what it's like there.
I mean, I think things are going well on the whole. It's like all the time where we're juggling too many things, and periodically things aren't going as well in one department as they should. But on the whole, I feel like every year we get more mature and developed. And this year, I'd say the biggest thing farm-wise is we have our ruminants, so 2 sheep and 2 goats, and we're just moving them around the property. And instead of having to mow, they're just chewing all that up and then, pooping that nutrition back into the soil, which is how humans have done it until we decided we could just have oil and machinery mow our lawns for us. So I think that's the best thing farm-wise that is new this year.
Mm-hmm. And has been pretty successful in terms of moving the fencing around. I feel like that was a struggle for a while, of getting electric fencing strong enough, and us just more used to what that looks like, of moving things around on different landscapes on our property. So, and getting the neighbors acclimated to hearing the noise is associated with that. So
yeah, when I'm there, I hear other people's roosters, and I don't know if anybody else has sheep or goats in that area, but I definitely hear roosters crowing.
Yeah. Well, yeah, funny enough, the same week we got the sheep, there was a stray sheep in the neighborhood running around. So one of our neighbors thought that our sheep had gotten out, but it was really someone else's sheep. So running amok the neighborhood. So perhaps someone else does, but we don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just describe the area. So how is it that another person's sheep could just be running around, and just kind of describe the neighborhood and where you guys are at?
The neighborhood is historically it was a Polish immigrant neighborhood, and now it's more of a working class Hispanic neighborhood for the most part. But a lot of people are have backyard chickens. They are doing some of that themselves. Not a lot of gardens in the area, but it's still pretty densely populated for like a neighborhood, but we happen to be at the end of a block, I guess, that bumps up against a like wooded forest area, where a river is running through. So we've got a few houses at the end of a street, and then across the street we have roughly what, an acre of,
Like a third of an acre.
I think it's about that, but yeah, roughly a third of an acre across the street that has an orchard that was there before we got the property, with some new trees that we planted, and a big garden area and compost and a high tunnel and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
we've got an interesting campus here in the east side of Kansas City. So
Yep. Yep. And you've been there for what, about 5 years now, at least?
We got the property right before COVID. So
Right. Yeah.
that puts us at the beginning of year 5.
Yeah. That's
wait.
changed a lot.
yeah,
So-
which I think that goes to Spencer's point of like, you know, in the moment, I feel like we're usually pretty hard on ourselves in terms of the garden's a mess, there's weeds everywhere, living with people is hard, and but every year it does seem to get like better and more established and things like that. Like I think the ruminants in the orchard this year are like what we're like really proud of right now after a few years of like pruning back these trees that have never been pruned and probably the entire time they've been growing. So just small things like that. I think we're trying to consider wins, even though our garden is filled with weeds currently. So
Yeah, if only if goats could like distinguish weeds from plants, that would be good.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But you know, the soil is good enough that the weeds, I mean, when I've been there, I've pulled a lot of weeds and they're easier to pull
Mhm,
because like the soil is not compacted at all.
mhm.
And so you can get in there and actually like, but it's a lot of land. I mean, so, and you know, like, do you guys have a whole lot of help?
No.
No,
Yeah. So like,
Yeah.
yeah, you can't do it all. That's right. Yeah.
no, especially after like, especially now that at least our current plan for how to keep this running is for us to just get outside incomes and then just fund this as a homestead, since we've basically given up in the short term on fundraising. So what it means is we're as divided as we've kind of always been, with between having to have an outside income and basically work 30 to 40 hours a week and then come home and deal with our second job.
Which is
Mhm.
kind of a Catholic worker thing, is it not? Like, so
Absolutely. I think if you get enough people doing that, like you can get a lot done on like a homestead. So I think we're just hoping that like this next year will really show the fruits of the work we're putting in now, with that kind of routine of everyone's working a bit outside to fund resources to the community.
mhm,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, it's no doubt it's a lot of work. So, but the animals are keeping up with they're basically the lawnmowers. This is good.
hmm Yeah, this is the time of year they shine. So
Yeah.
yeah, our feed prices have gone down just because like they're just outside grazing all day, and yeah, they almost look pregnant. They're like so fat and bloated from eating so much. Yeah. They're doing well. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, they'll fatten themselves up for the winter time, you know. But don't eat them. Keep them for next year.
Yeah.
I mean, our chicken flock keeps getting slowly bigger, so we're getting about 2 dozen eggs a day,
hmm
which we either eat or we give to neighbors or family.
hmm Yeah. And we're harvesting a lot of tomatoes and apples right now is what we have an abundance of. So lots of pasta sauces, and I'm dehydrating a bunch of apples to make into little chips and stuff. So
Yeah, those are good. I had those last year. Those are quite tasty. I was
yeah.
going to ask about preservation, and so you you do some dehydrating? Do you do any like freezing or canning or anything like that?
We haven't yet, just because we've been able to like give away to like some volunteers that'll come around, like any food or sauces that we've made. Um, but
You did make some kimchi.
oh yeah, that was yeah, I guess a few months ago. I made a huge batch of kimchi with a lot of bok choy we grew this spring. And that was also, I mean, it's preserved, it's in our fridge now, but given away to a lot of people, which it's nice to have around whenever people come out for, a few hours, and it's just a nice token of like something that they help with on the farm they can now go back and enjoy. So yeah.
That's cool.
I think last time we talked, we were fixing up the house next door, and currently there's I don't know, a worker guest staying in there, and he puts in 14 hours a week, kind of doing what they call in construction a yard bird. So just kind of going around, cleaning things up, keeping things organized.
That's Sammy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, he's neat. And I've seen him work. He's a hard worker.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Tell people all it went, that has been done with that house, because the last time we talked, none of that was done. So like, what'd you guys do to make it like to where, he could live in there?
I mean, we painted the whole front 2 rooms. We turned a closet into like a half bath. We got new flooring in there. Got it furnished.
Sewer.
Yeah, we had to we put in the new sewer stack for the whole house because ours was all old and clogged, and it really actually makes me resent the amount of work we do for indoor plumbing is pretty wild.
Uh-oh, I feel like a rant coming on here. Should we just be using like a outdoor latrine or
Probably. Or we should have sophisticated neighborhood composting systems. If we didn't live in a dark age, which we don't, and I'm just working on accepting that we do live in a dark age. And that we will have a whole industry to use a bunch of plastic so we don't have to think about our waste.
So now you've got 2 bathrooms.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which in a practical sense is what it takes to actually to maybe get somebody in there. But yeah, I hear you. No, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But I mean, you're in construction, that's kind of what you do. So like that came in kind of handy and useful there. It sounds like.
Yeah. Well, and Nick led the whole project, but yeah. So yeah, now it's originally we were maybe going to have a Catholic worker come from Chicago and stay with us for a year, but he decided not to do that. And so in the meantime, we have Sammy in that room.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And then you've got, and Nick is also in that house, is he not? Or yeah, right.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got 3 people there total, right? Is that still the case? Okay.
Nick Leland lives in the bus.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a development. We didn't install it, but an electrical panel like hook up on the other side of the street of our property. So he'll be able to move his bus back up, and it's currently parked on the street. So that took up a certain amount of bandwidth and money to get that to happen. So
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. He's got a schoolie, more or less. And yeah. Got plans for sounds like winterizing it. So we'll hope that he does that more fully before it gets cold out. But you're looking doubtful. But yeah, like there's 3 people there, and sounds like everybody's like reasonably comfortable, and that's kind of cool, so you got a little community there. It may seem kind of haphazard or whatever, but
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the way it feels when I'm there. Everybody kind of belongs in his own way. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
We decided to name it Casa Aggiornamento.
Uh-huh.
Aggiornamento was the old like Vatican II era term for like updating and modernizing and representing. And the idea is that like for our guests that stay there through encountering all the experiences on the farm and all of the literature we have around, hopefully they too will be aggiornamento,
Nice.
as it were.
Yeah. And it's like a revisioned agronomic university there too, you know, like it's Maurin's like old vision of the Catholic Worker Farm and agronomic university um, moved into our modern times to a certain extent. I see it that way. So I really like that name. That's nice. And it gives us the occasion to explain it too, you know, which is it's a conversation starter. One thought I've had is that Catholic workers are concerned about, you know, the poor. Many of them practice voluntary poverty in order to for there not to be any sort of demarcation line between them and anybody else. But in addition to like having these folks kind of share in the community, you know, you run this farm, and I guess I've always kind of conceived of that as an environmental mission and sort of in a way, you know, the world is part of the poor too, because of the way that we treat it and the state that it's in, I guess. I don't know. Like, do you like think of it that way?
Yes, at least to a degree. Like I would say, like for me specifically, I got into farming out of an activist mentality where I saw that like the way we produce our food is not good for us or for the planet. And so for me, the main thing I wanted to do when I like entered farming wasn't to just grow a bunch of food. It was to like show that we can grow food differently. And part of that differently, obviously part of that is like we could use way fewer chemicals. And we can grow this food in more like the key word would be like biomimicry. We can grow this food in more natural ways that are more low impact on the climate, and that are better for us. But it was also if we can rely on our neighbors or like dare I say comrades, then to some extent we don't need as much machinery and intensive capital to grow at least a portion of our diet. That's one I that's a big part of what I wanted to set out to do, not just like to prove to other people or to like inspire other people, but even more so, I just wanted to do it because I think it is what we should all be striving to do.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's true. Results are very mixed because the dirty secret I've learned, or one of them, is that like there's an old ranching joke about like what it takes to make a small fortune in ranching is years of blood, sweat, and tears and a large fortune. And I think that's how a lot of things in life function. That the secret is you need a large fortune, and not merely. I don't just mean you need a bunch of money, but you need some reservoir of resources, whether that's like your dream or your work ethic or like a community. You need something. It's you can't really make something out of nothing. And if you think you have, it's really because you had something to leverage. I think that's true. Like I was thinking about how in a lot of Catholic circles, it's a kind of trendy thing to say, you know, the true Catholic position is somewhere between like a radical environmentalism and just like a kind of ecological nihilism. And so, yeah, and I'm thinking these are like people like Bishop Barron would be an example of this kind of they want to be this radical golden mean between climate change is horrific. We shouldn't have so many people. We we need population control. Maybe we all need to be vegans. There's this kind of, Robert Sanger utilitarian kind of perspective. And then it's alleged that there's lots of people who, I guess, this has to be more implied than like consciously held, because then you have to say, well, the opposite of that are people that just like cackle while they dump chemicals in rivers and while they strip mine the soil. And the idea is we want to be between these two things. And that's an easy thing, I think, to maintain intellectually. But then as soon as you say, okay, can you show me anything in your life? Like I would say this to the average American, can you point to anything in your life that hasn't been negative to the planet?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think, like, in effect, the radical environmentalists are right in that Americans basically are parasites. And it's not because like they're just humans or this is the essential human nature, but it's just like, I mean, if you're still listening to this, think about like, what have you done to not make the world a worse place from an ecological perspective?
Mm-hmm.
And usually there's very little, because we have accepted, we're just going to get our food from the grocery store. We have no idea where it comes from. It's probably laced with all sorts of chemicals. And one way that people can assuage this guilt is to say, well, I'm not the one cackling while I dump chemicals in the river. And that misses the point that like our lives are deeply and tragically implicated with the destruction of the environment. This tangent is what I'm trying to say, though, is what I set out to try and demonstrate when I started farming 10, 15 years ago, and we're still doing it, is to show like, well, you can live in a city and you can't fix everything, but you can at least begin to take basic responsibility for rudimentary things like, where do your food scraps go? Are they getting composted? If not by you, then by somebody else? Or are they just going in a landfill where they turn into methane?
Mm-hmm.
And part of where I'm halfway demoralized is I find that if you ask that question to people that say they're part of the golden mean of we're not radical environmentalists, but we're also not nihilists, actually people get very, very uncomfortable because they don't care enough to actually change, but they also don't want to feel judged.
Hardly anybody's cackling anyway. Like that's,
Right.
people
Well,
have this,
it's a straw man position, really.
right.
Yeah, and I think what we found too, I mean, eating is a very like intimate and personal act almost, because like
it's our body, our choice.
Yeah. But no, I think that's part of why we've bumped up to so much, like, we're claiming basically that like why it is something that like, people should take more seriously, and it's not just like our pet issue or whatever. Like it's something that most people are doing 3 times a day, and it's like you are literally choosing to put certain food in your mouth. So like you should care a lot and should see the effects of how it affects the agriculture and the environment and so on. But there's a lot of resistance to those arguments we found, even with like our friends. Even with like our family too. I mean, it's a very personal act, I guess. And it's a sensitive topic.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're trying to draw an analogy between us treating Mother Nature, if you will, as the poor, it's a similar problem too, of like, well, what if you gave more money to the poor? And it's like, well, but I need to save money, or my kids, or whatever. I have all these loans I need to service.
Yeah. The irony is that if you just stopped spending money, you could probably pay down those loans, right? Like to a certain extent, I mean, not everybody, but many Americans have quite a bit of discretionary income, but they don't, because they spend it all on stuff that they don't need. Or like I would bet, I was thinking, watching people's habits and such, like that a person could spend $1,500 to $2,000 a month easily on food if they never cooked, if they never Yeah, basically if they were getting takeout and eating out and maybe getting like meals that get mailed to you or a combination thereof. And there's a growing number of people who do that, who have no idea how to cook and are spending that kind of money, and may not even realize how much money they're spending or that there's an alternative, because they're so out of touch with just even like making their own food, let alone what that food is. And yeah, like it's a lot. Now, a lot of people are not in that position, but I know some folks who are, I guess. And it's astounding. Like I probably spend 1/3 to 1/4 of what some other folks spend on food. Eating out is something that's kind of a luxury. And otherwise I cook. Also, if you just can like eat simply most of the time, it's really not that bad. It's not that much of a time sink, but yeah, like anyway, that's a bit of a rant, but that is beginning to like strike me as like, for instance, McDonald's here. There's people who go to McDonald's every day. Well, it used to be that you could save money eating that, whatever it is, not quite food at McDonald's. It used to be cheap. That was the appeal. Now it's like $15 or more to like eat at McDonald's. The only reason people are doing it is because it's super fast. And I think you both have a very good point. They're not thinking about their own bodies, their own health, let alone the environment. They're not thinking about where the food comes from, but more immediately, they're just not even thinking about their own physical well-being.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting.
Yeah. And where I'm in the camp of like, I know it's not fully their fault, is like, as a society, we have not emphasized like that knowledge. Like, even from the fact of like, my parents' generation probably took like home ec classes or like things about like, this is like how you cut an onion or something. Whereas like when I was growing up, it was like all about STEM, science, lab things. And like, I didn't learn how to do those things in school or stuff like that. But we are pushing, technology and engineering and all these things of those advancements, but not coming back to the simple matters of like, well, what are we putting in our body 3 times a day?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it's interesting to me, like when we kind of press that point to people, like people like squirm and then they characterize it as this like very particular niche thing. Like we're denying that other things in life are important. Which one, we're not, it's whenever somebody's caricaturing you like that, I've concluded it's really about sort of like not having to confront the reality you're presenting them with. Like,
right.
Saying that isn't to deny that, say, housing is important,
Right.
that you don't need an economy that escapes the realities of local food production or something. But also, to me, the bigger blind spot is people want to believe this thing that they do 3 times a day is somehow or other like not important. And I guess I don't know how people sleep at night, but I guess the average American does sleep at night soundly, not really considering those questions. Or they're distracted by the downstream effects, like, oh, I'm unhealthy, and what do I do to get healthy? But it's hard to swim all the way upstream. If in fact it's all the way upstream, I think obviously it's more complicated than just this, but people don't want to confront sort of the infection under the skin. They just want to like band-aid it, I think, a lot of the times. Mm-hmm. Which is, I would argue, its own kind of poverty.
Sure. Yeah. Poverty of imagination and probably will. I don't know.
Resolve. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a poverty of community too. Like another thing people like, this is something that like family used to throw at me, like at Thanksgiving gatherings and things like that. Like people will I would occasionally get cornered and somebody would be like, but listen, and I'm not starting these discussions, but they'll be like, if a person's in a grocery store and they only have $15, don't you think it makes more sense to buy processed junk food because calories per cent than, you know, the raw vegetables that you have to cook? And to me, again, it's like the background of that worldview is to me more interesting than like whether or not I concede that I guess if you only have $15, it's better to go to McDonald's than get a bunch of raw vegetables and cook
Well,
them.
that only applies if you're absolutely starving at the moment, though. You know, I guess the bigger question is, do you have 15? Why do you just have $15? But that's another.
Right. And why are you a hapless individual in a grocery store? Yeah.
The cheapest way to solve that problem from a calorie perspective is a jar of peanut butter. I mean, you know, that's what, yes, that kind of argument drives me nuts. Whole Foods can actually have a lot of calories. It's not just, I mean, vegetables are great and people need them, but like there's also calorie dense whole foods that you can get at either the grocery store or farmer's market. That can like give you those calories that are not that expensive. So, you know, like, but what you get in a lot of that stuff is just empty calories without a lot of real nutrition. But of course, it's all fortified. So they would say, well, we're, you know, like hardly anybody gets absolute malnutrition in this country because they eat enough fortified junk food.
And it's a kind of triumph, the conquest of bread. But yeah, somebody sent me a meme recently where it was like, processed food was literally designed in a lab for people. Organic food is just some trash somebody picked up off the ground. It's pretty funny.
Oh, man.
Yeah, but I've concluded, especially like when it's been my family members telling me this, that really what more this person stands in for them justifying not buying organic stuff they could afford because they want to spend it on luxuries and or on savings. That's what's really at stake in this hypothetical hapless poor grocery store shopper in the state of nature.
Wow. Yeah. I guess I don't have any family members that are quite that, like, they don't argue with me about stuff like that. But if they did, yeah, would have fewer conversations. But on the other hand, they are, and a lot of, you know, friends and family can be somewhat indifferent to these things. And I think that's where most Americans are at. They're not like on some sort of crusade to like promote malnutrition or bad like diets and obesity, but they're just kind of like whatever in the moment I want is what I'm going to get, or, you know, whatever tastes best. And those are habits that are super hard to break. That taste habit, like, you know, getting used to, I'm sure you've dealt with this before with guests and people who come over, like getting used to the taste of actual food. Like that's at first people don't like it, I think, because they're so used to the manufactured flavors that they've been eating.
Yep. Yeah, you have to go through a whole detox phase.
Mm-hmm. And even something along the lines of like texture too is something that we keep coming back to, of like it's not just taste, but it's also like sensing that like this is like a carrot can be like really hard but also really soft if cooked, and like it's gonna like have a different effect on your palate as you're, you know.
And I especially despair during these discussions because
yeah,
I'm just like, keep chewing. The texture doesn't
Yeah, yeah. Me too. I'm just like,
yeah,
eat, you know, like I'm with you. Yeah, like sometimes if I'm in a hurry, I throw a baked potato into the air fryer. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what I have for. So, you know, I don't care too much about. I mean, I do. I enjoy food. Don't get me wrong, but I can be pretty utilitarian about it too. And so when I meet up with people that are like super picky about, you know, oh, I only eat these 3 fruits or whatever, or, it has to be crunchy. I don't have a whole lot of patience for that either. I'm like, just put the big girl panties on, eat your dinner.
I met when I was up in like rural Maine, I met this hippie who had moved into, there used to be like a whole commune there, and they built these like awesome houses with like this crazy local architecture, kind of like these really elaborate, like sturdy gazebos. I don't even know how to describe it. And she was telling me how like her mom isn't in good health, and she's tried to get her mom to move out with her because there's plenty of space in this house. And um and I guess she'd made the pitch to just come live in my awesome house with me. And her mom said, your towels are crunchy, because she's not using like the fabric softeners and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
And just the idea that the mom, who I think was miserable in town or whatever, is like, I can't experience a hard towel on my soft skin. It's a bridge too far.
That's really unbelievable.
But that's crap.
I got a solution for that too. Do your own laundry. But you hear that kind of thing all the time, right? Like this one little thing is preventing me from making a change in my life. And it seems ridiculous, right? So behind it is the fear of change generally, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the chemicals need to keep being dumped in the rivers, because otherwise we'd all have to change too many things.
Which we don't see. Yeah. Another example, maybe you guys can relate, is toilet paper, right? Like, in my mind, I remember the COVID situation early on when the stores didn't have any toilet paper. And people in my life were just getting really like anxious about this. And for the life of me, I couldn't figure out like what. Nobody needs toilet paper.
Well, but this is a rudimentary example of how we can't imagine things different than how they've been in our short lives.
Right. Yeah. It's bizarre, actually, what we do with throwing all that paper down the drain, you know. Yeah.
The dreams are bizarre.
It is weird. It is weird. We've got this little corridor that pipes all of our stuff out to, I mean, it's going to the same place that eventually turns into your drinking water, which is gross to think about. And then they test the drinking water and it's got like hormones and, antidepressants in it. Oh, here's the star of the whole farm situation. We put out a podcast with her a while back, and it was one of the best ones we ever did. Surrounding this topic, do you feel like part of your service to the world is to educate people about those issues related to food? And what is the main way, if so, that you would do that?
I feel like this is the area where we've like been unsuccessful, but like it is what I think we are kind of like trying to do by just like how we like are choosing to lead our lives. And maybe it's just as simple as like trying to lead by example and like offer like, I guess like hospitality to our lives to see like how we do it, and that it is possible to eat healthy organically with food that you grow and get locally and still like live a normal life. Like we're not like living off the grid or anything like that. But some of that is like maybe the education piece is just like the stuff that we're all doing through the Maurin Academy too, like on that level. And it's trying to be an example of like living this like holistic, hopefully Catholic centered life, So what did you say this? You said this a few years ago, but like from the soil to God is kind of like how we're looking at our lives, I think. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, one of these days, maybe we can, I know we've had Ryan before dealing with some like planting and stuff like that, and he's going to do that again next, probably in February. Ryan's going to be back to do a few classes on the planting side of things, but maybe at some point, you guys are so busy and everything, but it'd be cool to get something in the way of like food prep, or I don't know. People, I mean, people still need to be taught how to cook.
Mhm.
It seems crazy because there's only like a gazillion, like you just Google, I mean, literally the computer can tell you step by step and give you a video of how to do it. Um, but yet, I run into people all the time who don't have like basic skills. So they're not picking up on that, or they're not looking or whatever. Um, Surely, like I would say the guests that sit around your table too get a sort of education just by eating the food and realizing that it can be very good.
I think so. I mean, specifically for me, that's like where I strive to be like whenever we have people around is to like, you know, make really good food
Hmm.
and do my best. So, yeah.
Yeah, and it is. Yeah, delicious.
Yeah. And on that front of guests too, I guess something we didn't talk about is like in the last 6 months to a year, like I feel like we have gotten significantly more involved in the Catholic worker community, however still distant and new we are, but we have had like quite a few visitors and just people reach out, which and people who are like kind of into the same like are seeing the current state of the world in a similar way that we are, which has been really, really neat. And I think at least gives me like a lot of hope of, the Catholic worker movement isn't like fading away. It's actually just like, new people are hearing about it and joining, and there's new workers starting up as close as Wichita, which is just like 3 hours from us. And I don't know, I've been really grateful for like the relationships we've made through these different Catholic workers in the Midwest,
That's cool.
elsewhere. So
And
yeah.
we've got a round table coming up.
No, just that, yeah, I mean, Monday the 19th at 7 p.m. Central Time. But yeah, you'll hear just from like the Maurin Academy founders and colleagues of what's coming up with different classes and what we have planned. And then we'll leave the rest up to James to talk about the Peter Maurin Conference, which is the first or second weekend of September. And then we'll just have it open Q&A for people. So, but yeah, we've got a lot of exciting stuff coming down the pipeline. So
Yeah, if people want to get in on that, they can email us, right? At the Maurin
yeah.
Academy at Gmail. I'll
Mhm.
put that in the notes for this. So just email us if you're a Catholic worker, or you're an ally of the Catholic worker movement and you'd like to be in on that roundtable. You can email us, or if you're a patron of the Maurin Academy on Patreon, you already will be invited to that. So I'm looking forward to that. And I know at the Maurin conference, we'll be talking about, hopefully there'll be a panel on farming.
And even if people are still listening to this point of the video, if you're interested in visiting our farm, just email us as well. We've been having several more guests this past 6 months than we have before, so we'd try to make the space if you want to come out. So
Well, I guess we probably should wrap it up. It's been about an hour and we've had a good conversation. It's really good to get this information out to people. And I'm glad that everything's moving along. So thank you. Thank you for visiting tonight.
yeah, thank you, Laurie.
Yeah.